my wife hosted a surprise retirement party for her secret 20-year lover. It's funny, the things that lodge themselves in your brain, isn't it? Like this one image, crystal clear, that plays on repeat whenever I try to shut my eyes. It's the way the fairy lights in our backyard looked that night, all twinkly and innocent, a stark contrast to the absolute wreck I felt inside. They cast these warm, dancing shadows on the faces of our friends, our neighbors, people we'd known for years, all gathered to celebrate. Celebrate what, exactly? That's the question that's been burning a hole through me since. I remember standing near the sliding glass door, nursing a whiskey that tasted like ash, watching Sarah circulate. She was radiant, of course, always is when she's the center of attention, flitting from group to group, her laughter a melody that usually made my heart swell. But that night, it just grated. Every laugh, every touch, every shared glance felt like a perfectly orchestrated performance, and I was the only one in the audience who didn't know the script. They were there for Mark. Mark. The guy who'd supposedly been a close friend from her old college days, the one who'd always popped up in stories about her wilder youth, a vague anecdote here and there. Apparently he was retiring, moving away, and Sarah, in her boundless generosity and thoughtfulness, had decided to throw him a surprise party. A surprise party. The irony wasn't lost on me, not even then through the haze of shock and a creeping, nauseating dread. Before we get too deep into this, seriously, if you're digging the raw honesty here, the kind of story that's going to stick with you, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. It really helps keep this whole thing going. And while you're at it, give this a like. Maybe share it with a friend who appreciates a good, messy, real-life drama. And please, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Your thoughts are what make this feel less like talking into the void. Okay, back to the show. I met Sarah at a farmer's market. Seriously, like something out of a rom-com. I was struggling to find decent tomatoes, and she, with her effortless charm, pointed me towards a stall run by this old couple who always had the best ones. We struck up a conversation. It was easy, effortless, like we'd known each other for years. That's how it felt with Sarah from the start, like coming home. We dated for 2 years, lived together for another, and then got married. It was a whirlwind, a beautiful, picture-perfect whirlwind that felt like it was lifted straight from a magazine spread. Suburbia. The white picket fence was more of a tasteful wrought iron affair, but the sentiment was there. 2 cars in the driveway, a dog that shed enough to knit a sweater every week, and evenings spent grilling on the patio while the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. We talk about everything and nothing, the mundane details of our days, our hopes for the future, the stupid show we were binge watching. I thought we had it all figured out. We were a team, a unit, solid, untouchable. Mark. I remember the first time Sarah mentioned him, years ago. She was digging through old photos, and there he was, a blurry figure in the background of some college party shot. "Oh, that's Mark," she'd said, her voice casual. "We were good friends back in the day. Haven't seen them in ages." It was a throwaway line, and I barely registered it. People have pasts. Everyone has friends from before you met them. It's normal, healthy even. Over the years, his name would occasionally surface, a funny anecdote about a road trip, a shared taste in music, a particularly embarrassing prank he'd pulled. Always framed as a nostalgic remembrance of college antics, never anything more. He was a ghost of her past, a harmless footnote. Or so I thought. The first real crack, the first tiny tremor that threatened the foundation of our seemingly perfect life, wasn't dramatic. It was small, almost imperceptible. A misplaced text. I was using her laptop, looking for a recipe, and her messages popped up. A notification from a contact simply labeled M. The message was brief, something about thinking of you and can't wait for Friday. My gut did this weird little clench. Who was M? It felt too intimate for a casual friend. I dismissed it. Probably a work colleague, I told myself, or maybe an old college buddy. Sarah was affectionate with everyone. It wasn't a big deal. But still, the feeling lingered. A faint unease, like a persistent hum in the background that you can't quite tune out. Then came the late nights. Work was always demanding for Sarah. She was a senior architect, and big projects meant long hours, missed dinners, and the occasional overnight stay at the office. I understood.
I supported her ambition. I was proud of her. But the late nights started to feel different, more frequent, more secretive. She'd come home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers, or her phone would be on silent, and she'd become flustered when I asked about her day. Small things, really, but they added up, like pebbles accumulating in my shoe, each one a minor discomfort that, when combined, made walking impossible. I started to check her phone when she slept. I know, it's a violation. It's weak. But the gnawing in my stomach had become a roaring beast. I was scared. Scared of losing her, scared of what I might find, scared of the implications. One night I found it. A thread of messages. With M. It wasn't just friendly banter. It was loaded. Full of inside jokes I didn't understand, flirtatious exchanges that made my blood run cold, and plans for clandestine meetings. Can't believe it's been this long, one read. Still feel the same spark. Another. You always know how to make me feel alive. Alive. I felt like I was slowly suffocating. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow when I saw the photos. Intimate. Unmistakably so. Us. Sarah and I. We'd been together for 10 years at that point. Married for 8. And for God knows how long she'd been. This. With someone else. Someone named Mark. The college friend. The ghost from her past. He was older. Distinguished. With a smile that seemed to crinkle the corners of his eyes. And in those pictures they looked happy. Genuinely. Blissfully happy. The kind of happy that gnawed at me. A deep, soul-crushing envy. The party. That's where it all came to a head. The surprise retirement party for Mark. Sarah had organized it meticulously. Every detail. The caterer. The playlist. The guest list. She'd even managed to get his family involved. They flew in from out of state. She told me it was her way of showing appreciation for his long-standing friendship. A gesture of goodwill as he embarked on a new chapter. I'd played along, of course. What else could I do? Walk out? Cause a scene? Ruin the surprise for everyone else? My role, in my own mind, had devolved into that of an unwitting prop in my own tragedy. The house was full of people. Laughter. Clinking glasses. The murmur of conversations. It was the picture of suburban perfection. A scene I'd always prided myself on being a part of. But tonight, it felt like a cruel mockery. I watched Sarah, her eyes sparkling as she welcomed guests, her hand resting on the arm of a man who was clearly not me, not in the way she was touching him. Mark.
He looked every bit the successful retiree, tanned and relaxed, radiating an easy confidence. He was taller than me, broader, and he had that same crinkly-eyed smile from the photos. He laughed at something Sarah said, his hand briefly clasping her shoulder. A gesture that, to anyone else, was innocent, friendly. But I saw the history in that touch. I saw the years of stolen moments, the secrets whispered in the dark, the life they'd apparently built in parallel to mine. My hands were shaking. The ice in my whiskey glass rattled against the sides of the tumbler. I felt like an imposter in my own home. Every smiling face, every friendly greeting, felt like a betrayal. They were all here, celebrating a man who was apparently a huge part of Sarah's life, a man she clearly loved, and I was the oblivious husband, the guy who'd been keeping the barbecue lit while his world burned down around him. I remembered the night before, Sarah humming as she prepared hors d'oeuvres. "It's gonna be so special, honey," she'd said, turning to me with that practiced smile. "Mark deserves a proper send-off. He's been such a rock for me over the years." A rock, while I was the foundation, apparently crumbling under the weight of her deception. The air in the backyard was thick with the scent of grilled food and blooming jasmine, a cloying sweetness that made me feel nauseous. I saw Sarah lean in, whispering something in Mark's ear. He chuckled, pulling her into a brief, firm hug. It wasn't a peck on the cheek, it was a real hug. The kind you give someone you've missed, someone you're deeply connected to. And then, as if sensing my gaze, she turned. Her eyes met mine across the crowded patio. For a fraction of a second, her smile faltered. A flicker of something, guilt, fear, crossed her face. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar, luminous radiance. She gave me a little wave, a gesture of domestic normalcy, and turned back to her guest of honor. The band started playing something upbeat, a cheesy 80s hit that got people clapping along. Sarah and Mark were on the dance floor now, moving together with an easy rhythm. They looked right, like they belonged. A pang of pure, unadulterated rage shot through me, so intense it made my vision blur. It wasn't just anger, it was humiliation, shame, the sickening realization that I'd been a fool, a chump, for 10 years, 20 years if those messages were anything to go by. I downed the rest of my whiskey in one gulp. The burn was a welcome distraction from the hollowness in my chest. I watched them dance, their bodies moving in sync, a silent testament to a shared history I had no part in. This wasn't just a party. This was a declaration, a grand unveiling of a secret life, and I was standing in the shadows, an unwilling spectator at the celebration of my own undoing. The fairy lights shimmered, mocking me with their gentle glow. I turned and walked back inside, the sound of laughter and music fading behind me, replaced by the deafening roar of my own thoughts. I had to know. I had to understand. But as I stood in the quiet of our kitchen, the silence amplifying the chaos in my head, I was overwhelmed by a single, terrifying question. What the hell was I going to do now? The silence in the kitchen was deafening, a stark contrast to the forced festivity just beyond the sliding glass door. The scent of jasmine, once a comforting aroma of summer evenings, now felt suffocating. I leaned against the cool granite countertop, my knuckles white against the smooth surface. Sarah, Mark, 20 years, the numbers hammered against my skull like a relentless drumbeat. 20 years. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the phantom I'd glimpsed tonight. She'd been my wife, my partner, my confidant. Or had she? Was the last decade, the last 20 years, just a meticulously crafted illusion? Every shared laugh, every whispered secret, every tender touch. Had it all been a lie? I remember thinking in the initial shock that maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe the messages were innocent, the hugs just friendly. But looking at Sarah on the dance floor, her head tilted back in laughter, her hand resting so naturally on Mark's arm, the doubt evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard certainty that felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. This wasn't some fleeting indiscretion. This was history, a long, intertwined history that had clearly continued, hidden in plain sight, while I was busy building a life with her, a life I thought was ours, solely ours. The party wound down slowly. Guests began to depart, their goodbyes echoing in the hallway, each one a fresh stab of pain as they acknowledged Sarah, often with a casual mention of Mark, as if his presence was as expected and normal as the sunset. I stayed in the kitchen, hidden, a ghost in my own home. I heard the front door click shut, then another, and then the muffled sounds of Sarah and Mark moving through the house, their voices low and indistinct. I imagined them clearing away plates, whispering about the success of the party, about how well it had gone. Did they talk about me? Did they even register my absence, my deliberate withdrawal? Or was I just a footnote in their grand reunion, the unsuspecting husband who'd unknowingly hosted his wife's long-term lover? Eventually, the house fell silent again. The faint glow of the fairy lights still dappled the lawn outside. I pushed myself off the counter, my legs stiff, my body heavy with a weariness that went bone deep. I walked into the living room, the air thick with the lingering scent of perfume and mingled breath. The discarded paper plates and crumpled napkins told the story of the night's festivities, a story I'd been a part of, yet entirely excluded from. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her shoulders slumped slightly now that the performance was over. Her radiant smile had faded, replaced by a tired but still beautiful expression. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. "Hey," she said softly, her voice laced with an exhaustion that mirrored my own. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words felt trapped in my throat, a tangled mess of accusation and disbelief. I just stared at her, trying to see the woman I'd loved, the woman who had apparently been living a double life for 2 decades, the woman who had stood beside me at our wedding vows, promising a lifetime of fidelity. She crossed the room, her footsteps hesitant on the hardwood floor. She reached out, her fingers brushing my arm. It felt like an electric shock. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. That's when it happened. The dam finally broke. The carefully constructed facade I'd been maintaining all night shattered into a million irreparable pieces. "Okay," I echoed, my voice raw, cracking with emotion I couldn't contain. "Sarah, who the hell is Mark?"
Her hand recoiled as if I'd struck her. Her eyes widened, and for a fleeting moment I saw genuine shock, not feigned ignorance. Then it shifted, a subtle hardening, a tightening around her lips. The practiced mask began to reassert itself, but it was too late. I'd seen behind it. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice now defensive. A defensive tone I'd only ever heard when I'd accused her of something minor, like forgetting to pick up groceries. This was different. This was a precipice.
"Don't play dumb, Sarah," I said, the words tumbling out, gaining momentum. "The party, the surprise retirement party for your old college friend, the messages, the photos I found on your laptop. 20 years, Sarah. 20 years you've been seeing him. Who is he? Really?" She looked away, her gaze fixed on some point beyond my shoulder. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. It was an admission. Her silence was her confession. It's complicated," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "Complicated?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Complicated is when you can't decide what movie to watch. Complicated is not a 20-year affair with another man while you're married to me." My voice rose, the carefully controlled anger giving way to a tidal wave of hurt and fury. "Who is he, Sarah? Tell me, who is the man you chose to spend 20 years of your life with in secret?" She finally met my eyes, and there was a flicker of something akin to panic, but also a strange defiance. He's Mark, my friend." "Your friend?" I stepped closer, my body trembling. "The one you can't wait for Friday? The one who makes you feel alive? Is that your definition of friendship, Sarah? Because my definition involves monogamy. It involves honesty. It involves not building a secret life with someone else while you're raising a family with me." Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't feel like tears of remorse. They felt like tears of frustration, of being cornered. "It wasn't like that," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Not always. Not the way you're making it sound." "Then how was it, Sarah?" I demanded, my voice shaking, because from where I'm standing, it looks like I've been the oblivious fool for the last 2 decades. While you were off with your true love, I was here, loving you, building a life with you, thinking I was enough. Was I ever enough, Sarah? Or was I just the convenient option, the fallback plan? She shook her head, a frantic, desperate gesture. "No, that's not fair. You're everything to me." "Everything?" I scoffed. "Apparently not, because everything doesn't involve clandestine meetings and secret lovers and hosting parties for them in the backyard of the life you're supposed to be sharing with me. Who is he, Sarah? Is he married? Does he have kids? Did you know him before me? When did you meet him?" She wrung her hands, her gaze darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "We met in college. He was my first serious boyfriend." My stomach lurched. "College, that blurry photo. So he was your first love." The words tasted like bile. She nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "Yes, and after we broke up, it was messy. We both moved on, but there was always something there. A connection. A connection," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "A connection that lasted 20 years. That's not a connection, Sarah. That's a choice. A choice you made over and over again, while I was none the wiser." I took a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of control. "How long has this party been in the making? How long have you been planning this reunion?" "A few months," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "He's moving to Arizona. He wanted to see everyone one last time." "Everyone," I said flatly, "including me, apparently. You invited me to my own humiliation. You wanted me to stand there, smiling, and watch you celebrate the man you've been with for 2 decades. Why, Sarah? Why would you do that?" Her eyes met my eyes, and for the first time I saw a raw, unfiltered pain in them. It wasn't the pain of a woman caught cheating. It was something deeper, more complex. "Because I couldn't do it anymore," she whispered. "I couldn't keep living this lie, not with him leaving. It felt like the end of an era for both of us, and I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand." "Understand what, Sarah?" I practically spat the words. "Understand that you've been betraying me for 20 years. Understand that the life we built is a sham. Understand that you love him more than you ever loved me." "No," she cried out, her voice rising. "That's not it at all. I love you, John. I do. I always have. But Mark, he's a part of me, a part of my history. We shared so much, and when he contacted me again a few months ago, after all these years, it just brought it all back. The memories, the feelings.
Feelings? I was incredulous. You have feelings for the man you were dating for 20 years, and that's okay. What about my feelings, Sarah? Did you ever consider my feelings? Did you ever think about how I would feel finding out the woman I married, the mother of my children, has been carrying on an affair for 2 decades? It wasn't an affair, not in the way you think, she insisted, tears now streaming down her face. It was complicated. We never crossed certain lines, not while you and I were solid. But there were times when things were hard between us, and he was there, a constant, a confidant who was also your ex-boyfriend, your first love, and apparently still holds your heart. My voice was heavy with sarcasm and despair. What line, Sarah? Because the photos I saw, the messages, they looked pretty damn cross to me. I paused, the weight of what I was about to ask crushing me. When were these pictures taken? How recent are they? She hesitated, her eyes clouding over. Some are from a few months ago, others are older. A few months ago, the fairy lights in the backyard, the smell of jasmine, my wife laughing and dancing with her 20-year lover just months before this party. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. She hadn't just been reminiscing, she'd been actively involved, still. So, this party, I said flatly, devoid of emotion. This wasn't just a retirement party. It was a farewell to your real love. She flinched at the words. Don't say that. It's not true. Isn't it? I stepped away from her, walking towards the sliding glass door, the cool night air a welcome sensation against my flushed skin. I looked out at the empty backyard, the fairy lights still twinkling, oblivious to the wreckage they had illuminated. You know, Sarah, I always thought we had something special, something real. I thought we were a team, but I guess I was just the supporting actor in your lifelong romance. I turned back to her, my heart a lead weight in my chest. The rage had subsided, replaced by a profound, soul-deep weariness. What happens now, Sarah? I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. What happens to us, to our family? Because I don't think I can look at you the same way ever again. She stood there, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks, her face a mask of despair. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence was her answer, and it was more devastating than anything she could have said. I looked at her, this woman I had loved, this stranger who had shared my life for so long, and I felt utterly, completely alone. The foundation of my world had crumbled, and I was left standing amidst the ruins, with no idea how to begin rebuilding. And the most terrifying thought of all was that maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to. Maybe the truth, however brutal, was better than the lie I'd been living. I needed to know everything, every detail, every betrayal.
And the thought of digging into that darkness made me feel sick, but I knew I couldn't stop. Not now, not ever. The fairy lights outside shimmered, a cruel mockery of the happiness they were supposed to represent. I turned away from Sarah, from the life we'd shared, and walked towards the bedroom, the weight of 20 years of deception pressing down on me, threatening to suffocate me entirely. I needed to sleep, to escape. But I knew, deep down, that there would be no peace. Not tonight. Not ever. The image of Sarah and Mark dancing, their bodies moving as one, was burned into my retinas, a searing reminder of a love story I had somehow managed to miss. A love story that had been unfolding right under my nose for 2 decades. And the question echoed in the hollow chambers of my heart. What did that make me? The weight of those 20 years, a tangible thing, settled on my shoulders. I walked into the bedroom, the familiar space suddenly alien. Our wedding photo, perched on the nightstand, seemed to mock me. Sarah, beaming, her eyes full of a future I thought was ours. Now that future was a twisted wreckage, a testament to a deception so profound, so pervasive, it made my very existence feel like a lie. I couldn't even look at the picture. I couldn't look at anything. I just needed to lie down. I collapsed onto the mattress, the cool sheets a small comfort against my feverish skin. The silence of the house was no longer a void, but a screaming echo chamber of Sarah's confession, her fragmented truths, her evasions. It's complicated. It wasn't like that. We never crossed certain lines. Each phrase was a small, sharp shard of glass, embedding itself deeper with every replay in my mind. What lines, Sarah? What lines were you so careful not to cross while you were telling me you loved me, while we were raising our kids, while you were sharing my bed? My mind, a relentless engine of disbelief and pain, began to churn. College, Mark, her first serious boyfriend, the messy breakup, the connection that never died. It wasn't just a fling, it wasn't an impulsive mistake. This was a bedrock, a foundation of her emotional life that I had been oblivious to for 2 decades.
I tried to picture them then, young and in love, sharing that college dorm room, their futures unwritten. And then I tried to picture Sarah here, tonight, in my house, dancing with him. The dissonance was unbearable. I rolled onto my side, facing the wall, away from the accusing presence of our shared life. The children, God, the children. How much did they know? Had they sensed something? The casual ease with which Sarah had mentioned Mark, the way she'd said, "He's moving to Arizona. He wanted to see everyone one last time." It felt like she was trying to normalize it, to present it as a natural conclusion to a chapter. But it wasn't a chapter. It was a parallel novel, running alongside mine, its narrative interwoven with my own in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. I remembered moments, small things, easily dismissed at the time. A faraway look in Sarah's eyes when Mark's name came up in casual conversation, which was rare, but it had happened. A certain defensiveness when I gently questioned her late nights at work, which she'd always attributed to the demands of her career. The way she sometimes seemed to be somewhere else, even when she was right beside me. I'd always chalked it up to the stresses of married life, of raising a family, the mundane. But now it all felt charged, pregnant with a hidden meaning. I tried to force myself to sleep, to escape the relentless interrogation of my own thoughts. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Not just the dancing, but the phantom images conjured by Sarah's words. Him, her first love, the constant, the confidant. Was he the one she ran to when we fought? Was he the one who understood her when I didn't? The thought made me physically sick. I felt a burning, suffocating envy for a man I'd never met, a man who had occupied a space in my wife's heart, and therefore in my life, for longer than I'd ever suspected. A single tear, hot and heavy, escaped and traced a path down my temple, disappearing into the pillow. It wasn't a tear of sadness, not entirely. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated rage, of profound betrayal. I had poured my entire being into this marriage, into this family. I had believed in us. I had believed in her. And all along she had been nurturing this other love, this other life, this other man. It was like finding out the ground beneath your feet isn't solid, that it's a carefully constructed illusion, about to give way. I sat up, the movement abrupt, jarring. I needed to understand. I needed to know the full extent of it. I needed to excavate every single buried truth, no matter how ugly. The thought of opening that Pandora's box, of facing the full horror of the last 20 years, was terrifying. But the alternative, the ignorance, was no longer an option. I couldn't go back to sleep, to pretend. The world had irrevocably shifted, and I had to navigate the new landscape, however desolate it might be. I got out of bed and walked out of the bedroom, not knowing where I was going, just needing to move. The house was dark, silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I found myself in the living room, the remnants of the party still scattered, a stark reminder of the charade. I picked up a crumpled napkin, the scent of jasmine still clinging to it, and a wave of nausea washed over me. Jasmine, it used to be my favorite. Now it felt like poison. My gaze fell on Sarah's laptop, still open on the coffee table, just as she'd left it. The screen cast a faint, ethereal glow in the darkness. This was it, the repository of secrets, the physical evidence. My hands were shaking as I reached for it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew, with a chilling certainty, what I was about to do would change everything, irreversibly. But I also knew I had no choice. I sat down, the laptop cool beneath my trembling fingers. I navigated to her email, her photos, her messages. Each click was a deliberate step deeper into the abyss. I found the photos first. Not the ones I'd seen before, the ones that had sparked this inferno. These were different. Older, intimate. Pictures of Sarah and Mark, their arms around each other, their faces close. Some were clearly taken in college, grainy and faded. Others were more recent, disturbingly so. A snapshot of them at a restaurant, laughing. Another of them walking on a beach, his hand resting on her lower back. The date stamps mocked me, stretching back years, decades even. Then I opened her messages. Her phone was in the kitchen. This was her digital diary, her secret confidant. The years blurred together as I scrolled. The casual, "Hey, thinking of you," messages that would turn into long, heartfelt exchanges. The whispered reassurances. The shared anxieties about our marriage, about the kids, about life. But interwoven with these were the conversations with Mark. The late-night texts, the coded language, the declarations of love, or something akin to it. "Can't wait for Friday," one message from Mark read, dated just 3 months ago. Sarah's reply, "Me neither. It feels like ages since we could just talk, without any pretense." Pretense. That word. It echoed in the hollow space where my heart used to be.
My entire life with Sarah had been a pretense for her, a carefully managed facade. And I, the fool, had believed it. I found messages from even more recently, just weeks ago. Plans for clandestine meetings, disguised as errands or meetups with old friends. Evasive replies to my questions about her whereabouts. The casual, "I'm out with so-and-so," that I'd accepted without question. It was all there, laid bare, brutal and unforgiving. I scrolled through years of messages, my breath catching in my throat. There were times when they'd discussed the difficulties in my marriage to Sarah, times when he'd offered comfort, advice, and apparently more. There were expressions of regret, of longing. If only things were different, one from Mark read. We could have had it all. And Sarah's reply, "I know. It's always been you, hasn't it? Even with everything, even with the kids, it's always been you." That was it. The confession I hadn't dared to fully acknowledge. The bedrock truth. It wasn't just about sex. It wasn't just about a moment of weakness. It was about a lifelong, unwavering connection. A love that had persisted through time and distance. A love that had, in her own words, always been him. I closed the laptop, the click echoing in the oppressive silence. I sat there, stunned, numb. The anger had receded, leaving behind a vast, desolate emptiness. It was like staring into the void. There was nothing left. My marriage, my life, my identity as the husband, the father, felt like a costume I'd been wearing, a role I'd been playing, and the play had just been canceled. I looked at my hands, my own hands, and they felt alien. Were they the hands of a man who had loved a woman who had loved another man for 20 years? The thought was a grotesque parody. I stood up, my legs stiff, my body aching with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. It was a soul weariness, a profound depletion of spirit. I walked back into the bedroom and looked at Sarah, who was now sitting up, her eyes red-rimmed, her face etched with a sorrow that I couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge as genuine regret for me. She looked lost. And for a moment, a flicker of the old affection, the deep, ingrained love, stirred within me. But it was immediately drowned out by the cold, hard reality of what I had just uncovered. 20 years, Sarah, I said, my voice a low, raspy whisper. 20 years of loving him, 20 years of lying to me. She flinched, her gaze dropping to her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. It wasn't a lie, not all of it. What wasn't a lie, Sarah? I demanded, the edge returning to my voice. My love for you, our children, the life we built? Or was all of that just the convenient backdrop to your real love story? She finally looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, but this time there was something different in them, a kind of resignation, a weary acceptance. John, she began, her voice trembling, I never meant to hurt you. You have to believe that. And I suppose he never meant to hurt me either, I scoffed, the bitterness a corrosive flood. He knew you were married. He knew about our kids, and he participated in this. He accepted your invitations. He planned these farewells. He was a willing participant in my humiliation. He loves me, John, she said, her voice barely audible. And I love him. It's not something I chose lightly. It's not something I could control. It just is. It just is? I took a step closer, my voice rising, raw with emotion. So my life, our life, the life of our children, that's just a variable you could live with being secondary to it just is? You think you can just tell me this after 20 years and expect me to understand? Expect me to compartmentalize? To say, oh well, she loves someone else, but she loves me too, it's complicated. I walked to the window and looked out at the faint glow of the streetlights. The world outside continued,
oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred within these four walls. "I don't think I can do this, Sarah," I said, the words heavy with a truth that was both terrifying and liberating. "I don't think I can stay. Not after this. I don't think I can ever look at you again and see the woman I married. I see the woman who has been living a lie, a double life for 2 decades, and I can't be a part of that anymore." She didn't protest. She didn't beg. She just sat there, her shoulders slumping, her face a picture of utter defeat. The fight had gone out of her, and maybe, just maybe, the love had too, or at least the part of it that belonged to me. "What do you want me to do?" she whispered, her voice choked with unshed tears. I turned back to her, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the suffocating heat of my emotions. "I want you to pack a bag," I said, my voice steady, surprisingly calm. "And I want you to go. Go to Mark. Go to Arizona. Go wherever you need to go. But you need to leave. Now. Before the kids wake up. Before I say something I can't take back. Before I shatter their world completely." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of an ending, a brutal, unforgiving, absolute ending. Sarah looked at me, her eyes searching mine for any flicker of doubt, any hint of wavering. But there was none. Only the hollowed-out shell of a man who had just lost 20 years of his life, and the woman he thought he knew. She nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Then slowly, she stood up. Her movements were stiff, as if her body was as heavy and broken as mine felt. She walked towards the closet, her hand reaching for the handle, a ghost in her own home. I watched her, a silent, detached observer of the implosion of my own life. As she opened the closet door, a faint scent of jasmine wafted out. I closed my eyes, and for a brief, agonizing moment, I saw her again, 20 years ago, radiant and full of promise. And then, I saw her tonight, dancing with Mark, her head thrown back in laughter, her hand resting on his arm. 2 visions, starkly different, yet inextricably linked. I turned away from the sight of her, from the wreckage of our shared past. I walked out of the bedroom, out of the house, and into the cool, indifferent night. The stars were out, a silent, ancient witness to the human drama unfolding below. I didn't know where I was going, or what I would do next. All I knew was that the man who had walked into that house that morning was gone, replaced by someone new, someone broken, but someone finally free from the suffocating weight of a beautiful, devastating lie. The last breath I exhaled was long and shaky, like the first tentative exhale of someone who had just surfaced from the deepest, darkest ocean, unsure if they could ever breathe again, but knowing, with a chilling certainty, that they had to try.